All right, welcome, friends. Week 7. Hope you are doing well. So, hopefully, everyone's doing well, hanging in there. We are basically halfway through this course. So, good on you. Hang in there. Keep showing up. Please reach out to me if you need help with anything, if you need an extension. I mean, really, let's just both put the work in together and we will come out on top. This week is going to be a longer week of stuff, so please do get started early. There's a number of readings in the book that I want you to do. I do apologize because I'm pulling from a bunch of videos I have, some of which are old, and so not all of the references in them, like most of them are there. Like I'm going to use the same case study, but please just always refer to the week at a glance when we go into this, okay? I've graded most of the tests, and you are, again, welcome to email me and argue for points back. A lot of questions wrong that usually didn't get wrong, and it just might be like an element of virtual versus face-to-face. Things on like cultural relativism and, again, does the Holocaust strengthen or weaken the theory of cultural relativism? Well, sort of as a descriptive claim, it like strengthens it. It's like, this is why one culture does something horrible and another culture doesn't. But it doesn't really like make the argument strong, the theory stronger, because the theory would justify it. And this is one of these things where, like, as Aristotle said, you might not know anything about ethical theories or morals, but we know that like genocide, murder, and like slavery are wrong. And any moral theory that justifies those, like something went wrong there, no matter how elegant, no matter how like, logical it is. And so that's why I spend a lot of time with our emphasis on our moral intuitions, because they're strong and they're good. And I have a number of moral intuitions. I also have reasons to back up why these things are universally wrong. But that's what I kind of want us to focus on. So when we see things like the Holocaust, I don't think it actually strengthens our belief that ethics is simply a relative thing. And if a culture thinks something is right, like killing 6 million people, then that makes it right. Even though it happened, it explains why it happened, but it doesn't like justify its happening and say, no, it was a good thing. Hopefully that makes sense. And the other big one was that ethical subjectivists have to do ethics, right? And, I thought I was trying to emphasize this, and maybe I didn't do as eloquent enough of a job. But the idea was that, like, everyone in the world has to do ethics in that they have to resolve conflicting values. And even an ethical subjectivist who does what he feels, like sometimes, usually we know what we feel, but sometimes we don't. Should I stay with this person? Should I break up with this person? Should I take this job in a new city or should I take a job in this city? What should I major in? Should I major in this or that? Even if you just do what you feel, sometimes you don't know what you feel. Come on now. Do you drive home and like make a salad or do you go to Culver's? Sometimes you know what you feel and sometimes you're on the fence, right? You still have to do ethics. So I just want to make that clear. Now, I've had some trouble adapting this week's material to online, I'll be honest, because usually in class I have us read the Hippocratic Oath, the first section on page 42, and then I have us read a modern day Hippocratic Oath used in many medical schools today and compare and contrast the two. I'm not including it because there's so much other material this week, but I urge you to look up the modern day Hippocratic Oath, compare it against the one on here. And I just want to highlight a couple things from the excerpt from, I think I had you read pages 43 to 47. I just want to bring a couple of these points up front in our mind before we go into this. And I apologize for any of the stuff in the background. We're in the process of moving, and these are the times. So I appreciate your grace in this. So we are moving into a new chapter of really like the rest of this class is under the umbrella of patient autonomy versus medical paternalism. This is kind of the doing ethics that we will be engaged in for the next however many weeks are in this course. 7, 8, I don't know. Someone keep me honest. And we're going to talk a little bit more. I'm not actually going to introduce the sort of lens I teach informed consent and personal autonomy through. There's a number of articulations. I'm going to attach the case study that shows you the DMC, the decision-making capacity, the 4 criteria today. So you have like one window into it. We just looked at, this week we're looking at Kant's deontology and his idea of what it means to be autonomous, right? Not just doing what makes us feel good or maximizing pleasure over pain. But kind of what I want us to start thinking about once we get through the deontology this week is what is the role, the duty, the obligation, and the purpose of a healthcare worker? Like, what's your chief moral compass? And what happens when those duties conflict? I mean, I'll offer to you that at least 2 of the central ones are to do no harm and to promote the well-being of your patient, right? Do no harm. Oh, non nocere. No, I forget the Latin. This whole class, every time I try to speak Latin alone in my room, I lose it. Anyway, do no harm, promote the well-being of your patient, right? And so we're gonna like test this and see how it works out and whether we're ever justified in invoking medical paternalism, like the case of the physicians who forced surgery for an aneurysm on the erotic dancer. Right, it was against her will. She was in her right mind, as far as we know, and she sued him for millions. Right. So, reading from page 44. Again, what is the right relationship between a physician, a healthcare worker, and their patient? Yeah. Not long ago, the patient-provider relationship was conceived almost exclusively in terms of a patient-centered consequentialism that traced its roots back to the Hippocratic tradition. On the previous page, make sure you read it. Section 1 begins with a formative text of this tradition. If we turn to the Hippocratic Oath, we see that the doctor pledges to apply dietetic measures for the benefit of the sick according to his ability and judgment, and he promises to keep his patients from harm and injustice. This moral core of the oath admirably commits the physician above all else to the health and well-being of his patients, as opposed, for example, to the advancement of medical science, profits, or cost containment, if you know about kickbacks and gifts to pharmacists. Unlike utilitarianism, a form of consequentialism that instructs agents to evaluate the consequences for their actions for some large social group, you should be familiar. Patient-centered consequentialism enjoins providers to evaluate their conduct based on consequences for the welfare of the individual patient. Now, what is wrong with this, you might ask? Well, great question. Perhaps the most controversial element of traditional Hippocratic ethics, however, is the way it identifies the patient's welfare with physical health. This strikingly narrow way of thinking about the person's welfare allows the patient to be conceived of as a largely passive recipient of the physician's expert ministrations, which are determined by the principles of his art and his own ability and judgment. So, what is he saying here? Basically, he's saying for hundreds of years, the way it worked, the physician thought he knew best. He basically thought he was a mechanic. Person comes to him sick, peasant, whatever. He says, I don't give a bleep about your thoughts. This is your condition. I'm going to switch out these body parts, take this dietetic, take this this placebo, basically. It'll get rid of it. And your mental, emotional, social well-being is of little consideration. And you should be grateful that I took the time. And so, to continue, on this model, physicians are thought to be better suited to make health-related decisions for their patients than are the patients themselves, because the patient's welfare is defined in terms of physical health, a subject about which physicians and other health professionals have specific technical knowledge. Basically, because the physicians and healthcare workers are professionals and experts, they're justified in lying to the patients for their best interest, right? Because if they told them the truth, it might jack their blood pressure, it might exacerbate other symptoms, and so we invoke what we like to call therapeutic privilege, the right of healthcare workers to deceive patients for their supposed best interests. So continuing, This model, however, is highly paternalistic because it entails that healthcare providers can legitimately restrict or dictate the conduct of even competent adults for the sake of that person's own good. On the traditional model, the physician's duty to tell the truth to patients is subordinated to and derived from the more fundamental duty to do no harm. If, in the physician's judgment, telling the truth would result in depression or otherwise adversely impact the care of a patient, then the physician would be duty bound to withhold such information. So if you have cancer or you have some condition and the physician's lying to you because they think you're going to go crazy or it's going to like make you anxious or worsen your symptoms, they're justified in lying to you. How do we feel about that? Are we okay with that? We can see why, at the same time, in the 20th century, we have a whole host of unethical medical experiments, which I kind of end the class with. I'll scare you all at the end with the unethical experiments. Everything from Tuskegee, which people have heard of, to Willowbrook, to the Jewish chronic disease hospital case. And I bring some more recent ones in that eek. I might update it this year too. Lord knows. We've got some crazy studies going on. Um, so, in essence, in the 20th century, we see a rise in the recognition of the importance of an informed consent. And this is the interesting thing about morals, right? Just because no one got informed consent for thousands of years doesn't mean that they weren't right to. Doesn't mean that people don't have a legitimate moral right to accede, assent, and give their permission for things to be performed upon them. Just because it was taken away from them doesn't mean it's moral or immoral to deny that, right? I think most of us in the class believe that informed consent is a universal moral, right? Now, it might only be recognized in the West, but it as a principle, as a concept, explains most of the actions of right and wrong the world over. Yeah. Even in Guantanamo Bay, even though it's not US soil, we know those are crimes being committed there. Yeah. If we know about Gitmo. So props to you guys for making this far. Hopefully this works. Please do, if you're struggling, if you just need one-on-one time, you need to just Zoom with me sometime and walk through some stuff, don't hesitate to reach out. I know sometimes it's a day or two for me to get back to you. I'm spread across several places, but I will make time for you if you reach out. But hang in there. These are crazy times. These are the times that make us who we are. So, all the best. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to stop talking. Have a great week.